"I didn't do it," she whispered, her voice barely louder than the hum of the fluorescent lights in the interrogation room. But the cameras stopped rolling hours ago. The confession was already signed. 2 days later, she vanished without a trace. What happens when the justice system stops listening? What happens when a confession isn't the truth, but a cry for something else? This is the haunting story of Emily Carter, the girl who confessed to a crime she didn't commit and then disappeared. It began on a rainy October morning in a quiet town in Vermont. The kind of town where everyone knew your name, where the biggest scandal last year was a raccoon stealing Mrs. Liddell's apple pies. But this morning was different. The gray sky pressed down like a secret waiting to be told, and by noon, that secret would shake the town forever. Natalie Brooks, 27, walked into the Brattleboro Police Department with soaked jeans, trembling hands, and a look in her eyes that screamed she hadn't slept in days. She had called ahead and asked to speak to someone, anyone, in homicide. And when she arrived, dripping and shaking, Detective Laura Hendricks was the one who greeted her. Natalie looked like a ghost, hollowed out from the inside. "I did it," she said, barely above a whisper. Detective Hendricks frowned. "Did what, ma'am?" Natalie stared at the floor, the silence stretching. "I killed James Monroe." The room went still. James Monroe. The name hit Hendricks like a freight train. James had been missing for 3 years. No body, no leads, no real suspects. Just gone. One night he'd left the local bar and never made it home. His family had grieved, but without a body, hope had lingered. And now this. Natalie Brooks was not a name ever mentioned in the investigation. Not once. Hendricks pulled her into interview room C and started recording. "I need you to tell me everything," she said gently. Natalie nodded, her voice quivering. "I didn't mean to. I didn't plan it. We argued that night, in the woods near Cedar Creek. He grabbed my arm and I pushed him. He hit his head on a rock. He stopped moving, panicked. I covered him with leaves and left. I didn't tell anyone." The confession was raw, broken. Hendricks had seen a lot in her 18 years on the force, but this was something different. There was no defiance, no arrogance, just a young woman unraveling. Natalie was booked, fingerprinted, and processed. And just like that, a cold case was suddenly warm. News spread fast. "Local woman confesses to long cold murder case," headlined the local paper. The Monroe family gathered outside their home, a modest 2-story with yellow siding, and tearfully thanked the police for giving them closure. But not everyone believed it. "Nat," whispered Bree Collins, Natalie's best friend since kindergarten. "There's no way." Bree knew Natalie like the back of her hand. They'd grown up across the street from each other, shared sleepovers and secrets and heartbreaks. Natalie was soft, gentle, too sensitive to watch horror movies, too kind to swat a mosquito. Murder? Bree couldn't wrap her head around it. Natalie's court-appointed attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Evelyn Grant, was just as surprised by the confession. "There's no physical evidence linking you to the crime. No body, no murder weapon. Why confess now?" Natalie's eyes filled with tears. "Because I can't live with it anymore. Every day I wake up and I see his face. I hear his voice. I just want it to stop." But Evelyn wasn't satisfied. She hired a private investigator, Tony Delgado, to retrace Natalie's steps. Something didn't add up. Meanwhile, Detective Hendricks did her own digging. She reopened the Monroe file and re-examined the details. James Monroe wasn't exactly a saint. He had a history of violence, multiple assault charges, and a restraining order from an ex-girlfriend. Hendricks had always believed he crossed the wrong person. But Natalie Brooks? Why her? Then came a breakthrough, if you could call it that. Tony Delgado visited the site where Natalie claimed the argument happened, Cedar Creek. It was dense, muddy, and still full of wet leaves. Using cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar, they searched the area. Nothing. No remains. No blood. No evidence. Tony took a photo of Natalie as she watched from the edge of the scene. She looked relieved, almost like she had just expected them to find him. But when they didn't, she looked more broken than ever. "Where is the body, Natalie?" Tony asked later, showing her the empty results. She looked away. I don't know anymore. Maybe I remembered it wrong. Evelyn sighed. You realize this isn't helping you, right? But Natalie remained firm. I killed him. I just don't deserve to be free. The court case began 6 weeks later. Natalie pled guilty to manslaughter. The judge was shocked but accepted the plea. She was sentenced to 12 years in prison. People tried to move on. But something strange happened 5 months later. James Monroe showed up alive. He was found during a drug raid in Atlantic City, living under a fake name, with a forged ID and a new girlfriend. He had grown a beard and lost weight, but it was him. Fingerprints confirmed it. He wasn't dead. He had never been dead. He had faked his disappearance. The town exploded. Natalie's name was cleared in court. Her conviction overturned. She was released, but the damage was already done. The press had a field day. Woman confesses to a murder that never happened. James Monroe, the man who let an innocent rot. But no one asked the most important question. Why did Natalie confess? Bree visited her the day she was released. They sat in silence on the back porch of Natalie's childhood home. I still don't understand, Bree finally said. Natalie stared into the distance. Because I thought I did it. Or, I wanted to believe I had. What does that mean? I don't know anymore, she whispered. My mind, it's not right. It hasn't been right since that night. They were quiet again. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves. Bree watched her friend, once vibrant, now hollowed out. Natalie had spent 5 months in prison, but the real sentence was the torment in her mind. A guilt so convincing, it made her believe in a lie. Detective Hendricks quietly retired 6 months later. She never spoke about the case again. James Monroe disappeared once more, this time from public view. He never apologized. And Natalie? Some say she moved to Maine. Others say she joined a silent retreat. But no one really knows. She vanished, not because of crime or scandal, but because her soul had been bruised too deeply. Some scars don't bleed. Some crimes aren't real. And sometimes the worst thing isn't being guilty, it's believing that you are. The media swarmed Edenbrook like vultures circling a fresh carcass. For a town of barely 6,000 people nestled in the wooded hills of Oregon, Edenbrook wasn't used to attention. It was the kind of place where local gossip at the diner made more noise than national headlines. But now, Emily Carter's name was on every screen, on every station. Everywhere you turned, there was her face. Not the pale, empty-eyed girl from the interrogation video, but the yearbook photo. Smiling, alive, brushed hair and soft lighting. A face the country could love. A face that looked like it didn't belong anywhere near a jail cell, let alone a crime scene. Beautiful, brilliant, troubled. The news anchors used those words again and again like they were reading from the same script. They talked about her academic scholarships, her volunteer work at the animal shelter, and how she wrote poems that had won statewide contests. They showed videos from her high school graduation, footage of her blowing out candles on her 18th birthday cake. But no one could answer the question that gripped the nation. Why would Emily confess to killing Sarah Whitmore, her best friend, if she didn't do it? And where was she now? Detective Alan Keene couldn't sleep. He'd been with Edenbrook PD for over 20 years. He'd seen some ugly things in that time. Domestic abuse, overdoses, even a couple of suspicious fires, but never anything like this. Never a missing girl who walked into the station herself. Never a murder case where the only suspect volunteered the confession, and then disappeared before charges could even be filed. The department was small, just Keene, 3 deputies, and a secretary who handled most of the paperwork. They weren't equipped for the tidal wave of scrutiny that crashed down after Emily vanished. FBI, state troopers, journalists camped outside the station like it was some twisted pilgrimage site. Keene sat in the interrogation room long after everyone else had gone home, watching the footage again. The one from the night Emily came in. She sat perfectly still, hands folded, shoulders tense. Her eyes looked at the table, never at him. He remembered the moment she'd said it, soft but certain. I killed her, but it never felt right. There were no details, no motive, no emotion, and when they asked her to explain how it happened, what she used, where it took place, when she froze, just kept repeating, "It's my fault. I deserve to be punished." In the weeks after her disappearance, conspiracy theories spread like wildfire. Some people believed Emily had faked her confession to cover for someone else. Others said she was being threatened, that someone had forced her to take the blame. A darker theory suggested the police had done something to her, that her confession was coerced, and when it became clear they couldn't charge her, they made her go away. But none of that explained why she vanished into thin air. No phone calls, no sightings, no fingerprints. She left the station at 4:37 a.m., captured by the building's back exit camera, wearing her same jeans and hoodie, and then nothing. They searched the forests, the river, nearby towns, but it was like the earth had swallowed her whole. And yet, one person never believed she was dead. Harriet Carter, Emily's mother, stopped speaking to reporters after the first week, not because she didn't have anything to say, but because she didn't trust anyone to hear her truth. She sat at the kitchen table every morning with Emily's favorite mug. Black coffee, no cream, no sugar. The silence in the house was suffocating. Emily's bedroom was untouched. Harriet would walk by it, pause, and place her palm on the door like she could feel her daughter's pulse on the other side. "She's not gone," she whispered one night to no one. "She's hiding." Harriet had found something that changed everything. On Emily's desk, tucked inside a copy of the bell jar, was a torn notebook page. Scribbled in messy handwriting was a single sentence. "How do you prove you didn't do something when the whole world wants to believe you did?" Harriet stared at that page for hours. It didn't sound like guilt. It sounded like fear. Sarah Whitmore's funeral was the largest Edenbrook had ever seen. Hundreds gathered to mourn the 19-year-old who was, by all accounts, the town's golden girl. She'd just finished her freshman year at UCLA and was home for the summer. She wanted to be a nurse. She had a boyfriend. She had plans. Her death, and the mysterious circumstances around it, shattered everyone. They found her body in the creek 2 miles outside of town. No sign of struggle, no signs of sexual assault. But her phone was missing, and her shoes were placed neatly beside her on the bank, as if someone had cared for her even in death. Emily's confession came 2 days later, but the forensic evidence? It never matched. No DNA, no fingerprints, no motive, no link other than the fact that the girls were best friends, and that they had a fight 2 nights before Sarah died. A loud one, in public. Witnesses heard Emily scream, "You don't know what you've done," but no one knew what she meant. A month after the disappearance, something strange happened. The Edenbrook Library received a donation box of used books. Nothing unusual, but one of the volunteers noticed that a paperback copy of Wuthering Heights had something tucked inside. It was a photograph of Emily, not a selfie, not a yearbook photo. It looked candid, like someone had taken it from a distance. She was walking through a parking lot in front of a store that no one recognized. She looked thinner, her hair shorter. She wore a hoodie with the hood up, and she was glancing over her shoulder. The back of the photo had a date, October 19th, 3 weeks ago. That was 5 weeks after she vanished. The image was grainy, but it was unmistakably her. Detective Keene analyzed it, submitted it to the FBI, traced the book's origin. The book came from a thrift store in Denton, Washington, nearly 200 miles away. Team was dispatched. Surveillance footage was pulled from stores in the area, but no further sign of Emily. It was like she was always one step ahead. In Edenbrook, time didn't move forward after that. It froze. The town divided into 2 camps. The ones who believed Emily killed Sarah, and the ones who believed Emily was in danger herself. Flyers were posted. Candlelight vigils were held. The local church started a weekly prayer group called Bring Her Home. But even among the faithful, doubt lingered like fog. Why hadn't she called her mom? Why hadn't she come back? Why the confession? One night, in an anonymous post on a local Facebook group, someone wrote, Sometimes you lie because telling the truth would destroy everything. The comment was deleted within minutes, but not before hundreds saw it, and not before someone took a screenshot. Emily had always been different, not troubled, just deep. She kept journals. She asked hard questions. She challenged teachers when something didn't feel right. But she also smiled easily and loved fiercely. She wasn't the kind of person people ignored, which is why her silence was so loud. Every week brought a new rumor. She's in Mexico. She faked her own death. She's living off the grid in a commune. But Harriet clung to one belief, that Emily had confessed not to protect herself, but to protect someone else. And whoever that was still out there, watching. Then came the second photograph. It arrived in a plain manila envelope with no return address, postmarked from Spokane. Inside was another candid shot. Emily, this time in a laundromat, sitting alone, staring at a dryer. She looked older, sadder. A scrawled note on the back read, "You should have listened." Harriet brought it straight to Detective Keene. He studied the photo for hours. What did it mean? Who took it? And who was the message for? Him or her? Was it a threat or a cry for help? The FBI reclassified the case from missing person to endangered fugitive, a move that angered Harriet and confused the public. But to Keene, it confirmed what he'd feared from the beginning. Someone knew where Emily was, and someone wanted her to stay hidden. Detective Marcus Bell had seen it all in his 17 years with the Philadelphia Police Department, or so he thought. But something about Emily Carter's case gnawed at his instincts. It had been nearly 3 weeks since her disappearance, and while officially he was no longer assigned to the investigation, unofficially, he couldn't let it go. He found himself awake at 2 a.m., sprawled on his worn leather couch with the file spread open across his coffee table. Emily's mugshot stared up at him, tired, hollow, and entirely defeated. Not the look of someone who had just cleared their conscience, but someone who had given up, and that didn't sit right. Emily's past comes alive. Marcus had spent the last few days retracing steps, going through Emily's social media, her text records, her school files. What he began to see wasn't a girl spiraling into criminality, but someone slowly crushed under the weight of grief, pressure, and misunderstanding. In high school, Emily had been a straight-A student, president of the poetry club. She volunteered at the local shelter. A glowing reference letter from her sophomore English teacher read, "She sees the world in ways most adults can't. Her empathy is her greatest gift, and sometimes her greatest burden." But after the fire that took her older brother, Noah, everything shifted. Noah's death wasn't just a personal tragedy. It had been the story in the local news cycle for months. A promising athlete dies in a mysterious house fire. Rumors swirled: drugs, arson, revenge. Emily had always insisted it was an accident. The heater shorted, she told anyone who asked. But the rumor mill was merciless. And as Marcus pieced together reports and whispers from old neighbors and classmates, he found something chilling. There were people who believed Emily had set the fire. There were no charges, no evidence, not even a formal investigation. But the whispers stuck. By her senior year, Emily had withdrawn from nearly everything. She stopped attending prom meetings, quit the poetry club. Her grades dropped, and a once vibrant girl faded into a shell. The other side of the tape. Marcus went back to the confession tape. He'd already watched it 4 times. But this time, he muted the sound and focused only on her eyes. She didn't blink much. Her fingers fidgeted with the cuff of her sleeve. Her gaze wasn't direct. She looked like someone reading a script she didn't believe. There was no tremble in her voice, no anger, no emotion even, just resignation. When the lead detective had asked, "Why did you kill Rachel Sterling?" Emily had simply said, "Because I was jealous." That was the sentence that had sent shockwaves. That line made headlines. Jealous teen kills cheer captain. But Rachel and Emily weren't enemies. Marcus had confirmed that. Their phone records showed frequent texts. They had a shared playlist on Spotify. and pictures from 6 months earlier showed them dressed up for Halloween together, laughing, arms wrapped around each other like best friends. So what the hell had changed? Why would Emily admit to something that didn't match the evidence, motive, or behavior, and then disappear? Jordan's phone call. Marcus wasn't the only one looking for answers. Jordan, Emily's college roommate, had been calling the precinct every few days, hoping someone, anyone, would take her seriously. Finally, Marcus answered one of her calls. "I know she didn't do it," Jordan said, voice cracking. "I lived with her. I knew her." "What makes you so sure?" Marcus asked gently. "Because she told me about Rachel. About everything." There was a pause. "She said Rachel knew things. About Noah." Marcus sat up straighter. "What kind of things?" Jordan hesitated. I think Noah's death wasn't an accident." And Rachel found something that scared Emily. The silence was heavy. "I tried to tell her to go to the police. She said no one would believe her, that people already thought she was guilty even back then." Marcus's skin crawled. He thought of the signed confession, the whispered rumors, the cold eyes in that video. "Do you know where she might have gone?" he asked. "I don't," Jordan whispered, "but I think she was trying to protect someone." Buried truths. The more Marcus dug, the darker things became. Noah Carter had been loved, that much was clear. But he also had secrets. A sealed juvenile record, rumors of drug dealing, an ex-girlfriend who vanished for a month and came back refusing to talk to anyone. Rachel Sterling had been best friends with Noah once. Her name popped up in yearbooks and dance recitals alongside his. But they had a falling out in their junior year. What if Rachel had uncovered something about Noah? Something Emily couldn't bear to let out? Could Emily have confessed? Not out of guilt, but out of fear? Or worse, to cover for someone? Emily's last letter. Marcus visited Emily's foster home one more time. Her foster mother, Linda, had mostly kept to herself after the disappearance, avoiding press and refusing interviews. But when Marcus knocked, she let him in. "I know she didn't do it," Linda said quietly, sitting at the kitchen table. "She was a lot of things, but not a killer." "Did she say anything before she left?" Linda hesitated, then got up and returned with a sealed envelope. "She told me not to open this unless someone who really cared came looking." Marcus opened the letter with shaking hands. The handwriting was neat but firm. "Detective Bell, or whoever finds this, I didn't kill Rachel. I didn't hurt her, but I did something else. I kept secrets. I let my brother die with lies still in the air. Rachel was trying to help me make peace with that. And now she's gone too. Everyone wanted a villain, and I guess I just gave them one. I'm tired of fighting, of screaming into a void that doesn't listen. If I disappear, it's not because I'm guilty. It's because I'm done being punished for surviving. Emily." The vanishing point. The letter changed everything. Marcus brought it straight to the chief, who reluctantly agreed to reopen the investigation. But time was not on their side. Emily had vanished 3 weeks ago, and now, with fresh snowfall covering any trails, the chances of tracking her down grew slimmer by the day. They searched her bank accounts. Empty. Her phone? Disconnected. Social media? Wiped clean. There were unconfirmed sightings in Virginia and one in Ohio, but none were solid. One trucker claimed he gave a ride to a girl who looked like the one from TV, but couldn't remember the exact location. Marcus stared at the board in his office. 2 victims. One dead, one disappeared, and one truth still buried beneath layers of grief and silence. Back to Rachel. He circled back to Rachel Sterling's autopsy. The cause of death had been blunt force trauma, possibly from falling. The initial theory had been an argument gone wrong. Emily pushes Rachel, she falls and hits her head, but the forensics were off. Rachel had fallen after the injury. There were no signs of struggle, no skin under Rachel's nails, no DNA evidence from Emily, and most notably, Rachel's phone was missing, never recovered. What if someone else had been there? Someone neither of the girls would have suspected? The third shadow. Marcus pulled up old security cam footage from the night Rachel died. There were only a few working cameras on that block, one from a parking lot and one from a nearby bookstore. At 11:08 p.m., Rachel is seen walking alone. At 11:13 p.m., a figure follows her. Male, hooded, tall, no clear image of the face. At 11:19 p.m., the same figure runs back the way he came. Alone. Rachel is found dead 40 minutes later behind a dumpster 2 blocks away. Emily was never in the footage. A new theory. What if Emily's confession was her way of protecting someone she loved, even if it cost her everything? Marcus dug into her past again. That figure in the video, it wasn't Noah. He was gone. But there was someone else. Brian Carter, the boy's cousin. He'd been in and out of jail since his teenage years. Always lived in the shadows. Always around, but never noticed. His record showed assault, petty theft, drugs. He had motive. He had opportunity. And when Marcus tried to locate him, he was gone. Conclusion of Chapter 3. Marcus stood at the edge of a story that was far from finished. Emily's disappearance wasn't just a girl running from guilt. It was someone walking into the storm to shield others from it. He stared at the letter again. The words haunted him. Everyone wanted a villain, so I gave them one. But who was the real villain? And could Marcus find the truth before another name joined the list of the lost? By the time the sun rose over the sleepy town of Crestwood 3 days after Emily Carter's disappearance, the town had already turned into something unrecognizable. Her photo was everywhere, plastered on telephone poles, store windows, pinned on bulletin boards at gas stations. Her face stared back from news stations with lower thirds that screamed, "Breaking! Teen girl vanishes after false confession." But behind every flyer, behind every newscast and hashtag, was a family that had been shattered. Detective Aaron McKay sat alone in his office at 5:17 a.m., staring at a still image from the last footage anyone had of Emily. Grainy black and white surveillance from outside the police station. She was walking alone, shoulders slouched, her backpack strapped tightly to her. Then nothing. The footage ended. No traffic cameras picked her up afterward. It was like she'd walked into a pocket of air and disappeared. And yet, Aaron couldn't shake the feeling. Something about it didn't sit right. Something about the way she'd looked in that room. Not angry, not scared, just resigned. He reopened the file, the one marked Carter, Emily, false confession. It shouldn't even exist, but protocol demanded paperwork. And paperwork didn't care if a 17-year-old was mentally unraveling or being manipulated. All it cared about was ink on a line. He flipped through it again. Her signed confession. The timeline. The sketchy evidence of her classmate Jason's death. She had confessed to pushing him during an argument near the woods. Said he hit his head on a rock. But the autopsy had revealed multiple blunt force injuries. None consistent with that scenario. There was no blood on her clothes. No motive. No witnesses. And Jason? His story was murkier than anyone had realized. Meanwhile, Emily's mother, Rachel Carter, was breaking. She hadn't slept more than 2 hours in the past 72. Her fingers trembled as she poured coffee into a mug emblazoned with Emily's 8th grade school logo. Her husband, Tom, sat across from her, silent. There were no more words between them, just the hum of grief and panic filling every corner of the house. Rachel stared at the newspaper on the table. Police search for teen after sudden disappearance. It didn't mention the confession, didn't mention the interrogations, didn't mention how the police had made her daughter sit alone in a room for 6 hours with barely a sip of water while they broke her down. She reached for her phone again, redialing the detective's number. Voicemail. Again. Then it hit her. She needed help from someone outside the system. Enter Maya Lin, a true crime podcaster based in Chicago, known for her relentless deep dives and ability to make law enforcement nervous. Rachel didn't even know how she got her number. But when Maya answered on the second ring and said, "I've been waiting for your call," Rachel felt the first thread of hope tighten in her chest. Maya drove down the next day. She didn't wear a suit or carry a press badge. She wore a windbreaker and carried a GoPro and a battered notebook. but her eyes were sharp, and she asked questions, the right ones. Why would a girl confess to something that doesn't match the evidence? Who was in the room with her? Who benefits from Jason being dead? She started recording a new season on the spot. The confession that vanished. Back at the high school, things took a darker turn. Emily's best friend, Lila Rodriguez, hadn't spoken to reporters, but she spoke to Maya. They sat in Emily's room, the walls still covered in posters and sticky notes and old ribbons from swim meets. Lila clutched a photo of them from sophomore year. "She didn't kill him," Lila said. "I know everyone says that, but I mean it. She wouldn't even squish spiders in the shower." Maya raised her brow. "Then why'd she confess?" Lila hesitated. "Because she thought it was her fault. Not that she did it, but because of what she knew." "What did she know?" Lila looked around the room as if expecting someone to be listening. "Jason. He wasn't who everyone thought he was. He was messing with people. He recorded things. Girls, mostly. Emily knew. He threatened her." Maya's pen stopped. Her breath caught in her throat. "He blackmailed her?" She never said the word. But yeah, he had something. She went to the counselor. I think the school brushed it under the rug. Detective McKay was thinking along similar lines. He visited the school counselor, Mrs. Danvers, who looked like she hadn't slept either. Her eyes darted nervously as McKay brought up Jason. "You know, it's strange," McKay said casually. "You never mentioned that Jason had any behavioral complaints. But I heard from a few students he'd been intrusive." Danvers pressed her lips together. "There were rumors. Nothing ever substantiated." "Emily ever talked to you?" Pause. "I'm not at liberty to say." McKay sighed, sliding a notepad toward her. "Just tell me this. Did she seem scared of him?" Danvers finally looked up. She was terrified. That night, Maya released the first episode. Within 24 hours, it had 1 million downloads. People were listening. More than that, they were angry, and tips began to pour in. Anonymous ones. A girl from a nearby school who claimed Jason had tried to film her under the bleachers. A boy who said Jason bragged about ruining people and never getting caught. Suddenly, the golden boy was not so golden. And suddenly, the police department was under scrutiny. Then came the break. A call from a long-haul trucker named Pete, who claimed to have seen a girl matching Emily's description at a rest stop outside Indianapolis, nearly 3 states away. She was alone. She looked thin, tired. She asked for directions to a women's shelter. McKay and Rachel flew out within hours. They searched every shelter, every diner. They showed her photo to gas station attendants. Nothing. It was like she'd been there and vanished again. But something about the sighting gave Rachel hope. "If she made it that far," she whispered to McKay, "maybe she's trying to start over." Meanwhile, Maya kept digging, and she found something chilling. In Jason's online history, retrieved by a whistleblower tech from the department, there were encrypted folders, hidden in cloud storage. Inside were videos, dozens, hidden cameras, school locker rooms, bedrooms, and in one, the night before his death, Jason was arguing with someone. Not Emily. It was a teacher. Mr. Wallace, the assistant coach and biology teacher. In his 30s. Clean record. But in the video, Jason was taunting him, saying he had the footage and would ruin him unless he paid up. And in that grainy, shaking camera, Mr. Wallace lunged at him. Cut. End of video. The timeline now made terrifying sense. Jason was blackmailing both students and faculty. Emily discovered it. He threatened her. She panicked. The next day, he turned up dead. The confession? A smokescreen. A terrified girl manipulated into taking the fall to protect someone else or herself. Detective McKay brought Wallace, Indiana. The interrogation was quiet, controlled. Wallace denied everything until McKay played the audio. He broke, not in anger, in shame. Said he didn't mean to kill him. Said Jason fell. Said he covered it up out of fear. Burned the clothes. Deleted backups. Didn't think Emily would confess. Never meant for her to run. It was both a confession and a tragedy, but still Emily was gone. Until one night 2 weeks later, a police station in Denver received a call from a local diner. There was a girl sleeping in the alley. She didn't have ID, but she matched a flyer someone had tacked on the corkboard by the register. The officer approached gently. She flinched at first, then stood. "Are you Emily Carter?" She didn't answer. He tried again. This time, tears filled her eyes. "I didn't do it," she said, and collapsed into his arms. The days turned into weeks, and Emily's disappearance continued to haunt every corner of Grayridge. Her face was on billboards, milk cartons, news tickers, and pinned to corkboards at every gas station from Utah to Nevada. But while the world speculated and mourned, Detective Julia Mendez became more obsessed than ever. Julia's office was a war zone of paper and paranoia. Walls were covered in timelines, red strings connecting crime scene photos, surveillance stills, and transcripts of Emily's confession. Her partner, Detective Marcus Doyle, had tried to get her to let it go, but Julia couldn't. There was a quiet scream in her gut. Something was off. "I need to go back to the beginning," Julia muttered one night, rifling through the original case files from David Lansing's murder. David, the man Emily supposedly killed. He wasn't just some random victim. He was a high school chemistry teacher. Clean record. Divorced. One son. Nothing about his life suggested danger, but the crime scene told a different story. There had been signs of a struggle, a second set of prints that were never matched, and most disturbingly, a burner phone found in David's sock drawer with calls made to an untraceable number. Julia leaned back in her chair. The confession hadn't mentioned that phone. Emily had confessed to hitting David with a lamp in a panic, but that wasn't what killed him. The coroner noted signs of strangulation. "She didn't know how he died," Julia whispered, "because she wasn't there. She couldn't believe it had taken her this long." The confession was detailed but vague on the most critical facts. It had been the way Emily looked down when she said she just wanted it all to stop. Julia had assumed she meant guilt. But what if she meant pressure? Manipulation? Coercion? The case began to splinter open in Julia's mind. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, in the outskirts of an Arizona desert town, a waitress named Mary took a break outside the diner where she worked. She lit a cigarette with shaky fingers and looked toward the edge of the dusty highway. A girl sat at the bus stop, knees hugged to her chest. She was thin, pale, and wearing a hoodie 2 sizes too big. "Been there all day," Mary muttered. Something tugged at her, something more than just the girl's stillness. She approached. "You okay, hon?" The girl looked up. Mary dropped her cigarette. She recognized the face. She'd seen it on the news a month ago. Oh my God, you're that missing girl. Emily." Emily looked panicked for a second, then her body slumped. Tears spilled silently from her eyes. "Please don't call the cops," she said. "Please, I didn't do anything wrong." Mary didn't know what to say. She didn't reach for her phone. Instead, she wrapped her arms around the trembling girl. "It's okay. You're safe now." Emily's knees gave out. She collapsed into Mary's arms like a bird with broken wings. In Grayridge, Julia was piecing together new connections. She'd requested the burner phone records again, something the original team had buried. There were 4 outgoing calls made to the same number over 3 weeks, and the owner of that number had remained anonymous. Until now, pinged again. An anonymous tip had come into a southern Arizona sheriff's department. A girl fitting Emily Carter's description was seen wandering near the outskirts of Safford. Julia was on a plane within the hour. Emily sat in the back of Mary's car, staring blankly at the road ahead. Mary had brought her food, clean clothes, and offered to let her stay at her trailer until she figured things out. "You don't have to tell me everything," Mary said gently, "but maybe you shouldn't be running. You look tired of running." Emily turned to her. Her eyes were hollow. "I didn't kill him, but I thought I had to say I did. Or they'd go after my sister." Mary's stomach dropped. "You have a sister? She's younger. Sick. Someone knew something. They threatened to hurt her if I didn't take the blame." The air in the car turned cold. Mary didn't know what to say, but one thing was clear. Emily Carter wasn't hiding because she was guilty. She was hiding because she was trying to protect someone she loved. When Julia arrived in Safford, the sheriff met her with a cautious expression. "We think she's here," he said, "but she vanished again before our team got eyes on her." Julia stared down the road. "She's running from something worse than prison,"